Alright, buenos dias, ¿qué onda? ¿Qué pasó, you guys? John's Moto Garage. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be jumping on the Honda Valkyrie, and I've had this bike for, I don't know, about 2-3 weeks. I've been having a blast ripping around on it, and I'm totally blown away by the motorcycle. It definitely lives up to all the hype. It's just a beautiful machine, handles wonderfully, it's got performance, it's got torque, it's got all of that. And I've been wrapping my head around the thought that, why did this bike fail? Because twice, both with the first gen and the second gen, they came out with this motorcycle and it just did not do super well. They cut it both times because it wasn't selling. And so initially I just, I was kind of at a loss. I was like, this is such a wonderful machine. I don't know why the bike wasn't more successful than it is, but I think I figured it out. And so today we're going to jump on the motorcycle and talk a little bit about this. Obviously I'm a Joe Schmo. I'm not some expert. These are just my speculations, my thoughts on the subject. But today we're going to talk about why the Honda Valkyrie was a total failure. Gets my heart racing just sitting on the motorcycle. So this is a 6-cylinder Boxer 6 1520cc liquid cooled engine. It is carbureted, and I've done a handful of videos. I've done my ride review impressions on the bike, so you can check out all those videos. Again, today we're going to focus primarily on why I think this bike did not do better than it did. And the first thing right off the bat is this is just a monstrous motorcycle. It is a behemoth of a bike, not just on paper. At 730 pounds of the big 1520cc engine, which at the time when it was released, that was a lot bigger. By today's standards, that's actually not crazy when you look at the Rocket 3 2.3 liter and things like that. But still a big bike nonetheless, weighs about 730 pounds. And so right off the gate, you're already cutting out a pretty big chunk of the market. That's going to be all the newer and intermediate riders who are going to look at this bike and immediately dismiss it because it's just too much. I let my dad take this bike for a spin, and that was his thought. He doesn't ride a ton, and when he came back, he's like, this is an awesome bike, it's super comfortable, but holy crap, it's a lot of bike, it's a lot of motorcycle. And he looked over at the Honda Magna that I had parked in the garage, or the Yamaha FC09 even, and said that's probably more my speed as far as something I would ride on a daily basis. So this motorcycle is a lot of motorcycle. Second reason, this is basically your Honda Goldwing engine, but stripped down on more of a classic traditional cruiser looking bike. But what they also stripped from that are all the creature comforts that people love about the Honda Goldwing, that being so for example, your cruise control, your heated grips, your radio, your passenger backrest, all the stuff that you get with the Goldwing, you don't necessarily get with that aside from the heart of the motorcycle, that being the engine. And so I'm sure there's a lot of people that prefer this style over that, goofy looking spaceship like Goldwing. But once they start kind of crunching the numbers and thinking about it, okay, you got to add a backrest, okay, then we got to add some cruise control, then you got to add speakers, then you got to add radio, then you got to add a heated butt seat, and then you got to add anyway, you get the idea. By the time it's all said and done, all right, fine, I'm just going to buy the Goldwing. Or you go with the counterpart, your Harley Road Glide, Ultra Glide, all those other alternatives as well. They're just a more traditional V-twin. Jeez, this thing is just crazy. Such smooth linear power. All right, number 3. This motorcycle has these mid controls. Similar to the Goldwing, it's more of a sport touring position, and it's such a massive motorcycle. So, being such a big bike, it's going to kind of push away your shorter, smaller riders. But then your big, taller riders come up, they sit on this bike, and they feel a little bit cramped. I've had at least 3 people come look at the bike, all of whom were probably taller than 6 foot. And only one of them really complained about it, but you just don't have a ton of real estate with this sport touring position. I love it. It makes so much sense for me in terms of what this bike is built to do and how it handles and everything. But for your taller riders, you're going to feel cramped, and you are able to put these highway pegs on the motorcycle. But I think some people are turned off just by the fact that it's got this sport touring ergonomics, and that's the same as the Goldwing. And for that reason, I think some people don't even consider the Goldwing. All right, number 3, this is a 6-cylinder, and this 2003 version with each cylinder comes with a carburetor. And the more carbs, unless you're somebody who really digs into it and loves wrenching and is super mechanically inclined, the more carbs, the more headache, the more money that you're spending, especially nowadays. Back when this came out, that wasn't as big a deal because carbs were kind of the norm. Nowadays, a lot of bikes are fuel injected, and most people just are not going to be tinkering with carburetors. Most people on an old bike like this that's carbureted, unless they really appreciate what it is and want it just because of what it is, aren't going to touch it with a 10-foot pole unless they're 100% certain this bike is running mint and cherry as far as the carbs go. Nobody wants to be messing with syncing up 6 freaking carburetors. And that's another thing where you look at the Harley Davidson and you sometimes realize that in many cases less is actually more, or in this case less may be less headache, or less that you're dealing with as far as that goes. Man, I wish I could just split lanes on this thing. And that's another thing, again, because this is just such a big motorcycle, when it comes to, you know, splitting lanes and all that kind of thing, you don't get the you just don't get the options because it's a pretty big, hefty bike. Hopefully we can make it through this light. So this is a novelty motorcycle. It's unique, it's original, it's not what everybody else out there is riding around. But with that, it narrows the market on who's actually going to be interested in this bike. Now I think that's a bit of a shame because it is honestly such a fun bike to ride. I've really enjoyed myself on this bike. I've been pleasantly surprised by the handling and the performance. And I apologize for the wind because it's just, you know, with this windshield a little bit wild here on the freeway. But I gotta say, man, this thing at 95, 100 miles per hour does not skip a freaking beat, and it is the smoothest bike I've ridden. I just gotta make some changes to this windshield. I think it's a complete shame that the bike did not do better than it did, because what a freaking blast. This is its natural territory here on the freeway. There are few cruisers, very few cruisers, where at 100 plus miles per hour you glide like you're on a sport bike in the comfort though of a freaking touring machine. And it's a bit of a shame that this bike does have a lot of turnoffs for a lot of people. It just kind of goes against the grain to a point where it narrows the market on who will actually consider this motorcycle. I'm glad I tried it out. It is honestly, like I said, it is just a wild machine, and every time I ride it, especially here on the freeway, it does not cease to amaze me. Just the fact that it handles as well as it does, it has the performance that it does, and all that packed into this, you know. And bear in mind, this is a 2003 motorcycle, and it's only a 1520cc, which again, by the standards at the time it was around, that was a lot. by today's standards, that's not a ton of bike. You know, your typical V-twin cruiser has all that, if not a little bit, a lot more actually. So, and when I say failure, I don't mean failure as though the bike itself is a failure. These engines will run 100, 200,000 miles, no problem. But I mean, obviously, it just did not sell a ton of units, and it did not attract, you know, a ton of people. But it is a cult favorite for sure, deservingly so. And honestly, it's one of my favorite bikes. I honestly can say, of all the cruisers, this bike offers so much that you just are not going to get with any other cruisers. What a wild bike, man. What a wild bike. So in conclusion, you guys, John's Moto Garage, in my mind, this bike is not a failure. On paper, in terms of, you know, stats and sales numbers, this bike clearly didn't do well enough for Honda to keep it around. And I kind of understand why, but it's a shame because I truly believe that a lot of people out there just have no idea what they're missing when it comes to these big cruisers, and what this bike is able to offer in terms of handling, performance, and the whole nine. It's kind of like the best kept secret. Let me know what you guys think about this bike. Do you love it or hate it? Have you ever ridden one? Would you dare ride one? Would you dare mess with it? Drop a comment below, let me know. Like and subscribe if you dig it, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Adios, nos vemos.